Hello, everybody. It's Mark the Main Gamer here, and welcome back to Halo Deep Dive, the series where we take a look into the backstories of all major characters in the Halo universe from all sources we can possibly get from. So, the books, the comics, the games, of course, the movies, etc., etc. In the very first episode we had last time, we looked back into the history of Master Chief and Cortana. And I thought, why not do the person who was solely responsible for the implementation of the Spartan 2 program directly afterwards? So today we are going over the history of Dr. Catherine Halsey. So without further ado, let's go right into it and learn about the Doctor. Catherine Halsey was born on Endymion on March 19th, 2492. Her childhood would give a glimpse of what would have a promising career. She was smarter than her parents, always reading, talking, learning, and eager to share her knowledge with anyone who would listen. She was sent to Endymion Gifted, which was an elite academy where she continued to push the standards of education. In 2501, her exceptional performance in school afforded her a trip to Circumstance by the Dean of Biological Science at Coulter Browning University. The dean paid for her education until 2507. By this point, at 15 years old, Catherine was already writing her second doctoral thesis paper, in which she discussed archaic line commands. It's also known that sometime in her early life, she supervised the creation of the template for third-generation smart artificial intelligences. She was Vice Admiral Yzonris Jerome's star pupil as well. Oni recruited Halsey in 2510 as a civilian consultant and brought her to Reach. In August of that year, Halsey purchased a small hardback journal in a shop on Reach, near the base she was stationed in. Halsey used the journal as a medium through which to express her thoughts and concerns as well as pen important research notes, and would do so for another 42 years until she abandoned it during her escape from Sword Base. The journal was later recovered by Oni in 2553 and was designated top secret. During their survey travels for the Spartan 2 candidates, Halsey grew attached to Jacob Keyes. The two were involved in a romantic relationship in the early 2520s, and in 2525, Halsey gave birth to Miranda and raised her for a few years when on July 12, 2531, Miranda's father agreed to take her in, raising her on Luna. Halsey would later have a falling out with Miranda, who would later change her legal name to her father's and refuse to speak to Halsey for several years. Dr. Halsey served as a scientific advisor for the Office of Naval Intelligence from 2515 to 2522, when she was made chief scientist. She made huge contributions to many ONI Section 3 projects, including the creation and deployment of AI constructs. She created and initiated the Spartan 2 program and designed the Mjolnir armor system. These scientific advancements all proved to be important breakthroughs for the UNSC, as they were ultimately responsible for ensuring the survival of mankind. In 2517, at the age of 25, Dr. Halsey helmed the Spartan 2 program. Spartan 2 would create a new generation of super soldiers based on the earlier work of the Orion Project using abducted children. Establishing a set of rigorous genetic criteria to screen potential candidates, she identified 150 children for the program, but would only give her enough funding to train 75. Thus, Halsey made arrangements to meet each of the candidates in order to determine who her 75 candidates would be. At her request, Junior Lieutenant Jacob Keyes accompanied her to the interview of John 117. Upon choosing her candidates, she then had the children abducted from their homes and brought to the planet Reach for training. The recruited children were replaced with flash clones, which ultimately died within a few years from various neurological and physiological diseases due to complications arising from the unperfected flash cloning process. With the assistance of Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez and the dumb AI Deja, Halsey put her budding Spartans through a rigorous program of physical training, military indoctrination, and advanced tactics, supervising the augmentation procedures, combat training, and education, and monitoring the effects of the training had on the children. Halsey kept in close contact with her Spartans throughout their lives, from her base under Reach. Tellingly, she was always able to tell them apart from each other, even under half a ton of Mjolnir battle armor, an ability honed from years of familiarity for which her Spartans found annoying. Dr. Halsey always used their first names, never their ranks or Spartan tags. She had a huge amount of respect for and from the Spartans. As their only mother figure, she commanded absolute obedience from her Spartans. Accordingly, she was also privy to the Spartans' closely held secrets, having taught many to them as children, such as the security code Ali Ali Oxenfree. After first contact with the Covenant, Dr. Halsey, under the pseudonym Charlie Hotel, accessed the data archive of LCDR Alcigny's Oni sloop, UNSC Walk of Shame. During Dr. Halsey's investigation, she accessed the last conversations of the AI Mac in order to discover more about the Battle of Harvest. In 2544, Halsey was captured by a Covenant fleet during the Battle of Miradum while being transported in a cryotube. A team of Spartan 2s consisting of John 117, Kelly 087, Frederick 104, Solomon 069, and Arthur 079 were sent to rescue her with open-frame 92 extravehicular activity vehicles. Knowing Halsey's value to both the UNSC and the Covenant, Luro Taralume, the Covenant Fleetmaster, planted decoys in several CCS battle cruisers. Solomon was killed by one of the decoys, which turned out to be an antimatter charge giving off a false signal. Arthur was also crushed between two cruisers while covering Kelly from Seraph fire. John, Kelly, and Fred eventually located the ship Halsey was on and engaged a large number of Covenant forces. However, Fred and Kelly were separated during the fight, leading John to believe they had been killed. Nevertheless, John finally reached Halsey and rescued her from her cryopod, but they were stopped by then-Major Thel Ludam. Halsey then watched as John fought the Sangheili in an energy sword duel. However, the Fleetmaster in command of the Covenant fleet detached the section of the ship they were in, retrieving Thel mid-flight using a gravity lift, and jumped into slipspace. Halsey and John soon made it to a Covenant escape pod, but were engaged by multiple Seraphs. Halsey was visibly frustrated by the slow speed of the pod, going so far as to asking John to take out the Seraphs with just his assault rifle. They were soon rescued by Fred and Kelly, who had captured a Seraph fighter. They then linked up with the UNSC Prowler that had deployed the Spartans. Later, on board the Prowler, Halsey comforted John as he swore not to lose another Spartan. On July 26, 2552, Halsey was working under Oni's sword base when it came under attack by a Covenant corvette. After the destruction of the corvette, she called Noble Team to her laboratory for a debrief, where she learned of the death of her colleague, Laszlo Sorvad, who had been stabbed through the abdomen by a Sangheili Zealot reconnaissance team. After arguing with Carter A259 over Noble's failure to apprehend the Sangheili and Catherine B320's attempted access of Dr. Sorvad's restricted files, she learned the nature of Sorvad's latchkey discovery, a way to decipher data found in Babkatha Forerunner complex beneath Swordbase. After dismissing Noble Team, she began the decryption of the latchkey data in the Forerunner complex. On August 3rd, Halsey split Cortana into two, assigning her copy to work on the decryption of the Forerunner data in the underground facility below Swordbase, while her other half would prepare for the Spartans' mission, Operation Red Flag. When the UNSC Iroquois arrived at Reach from Sigma Octanus on August 12th, Halsey visited the ship. During her visit, Captain Keyes came to see her, and they discussed their daughter Miranda, the Keyes Loop, the Spartans, and Operation Red Flag. Later in the day, she visited Camp Hathcock to see John after his debriefing. On August 27th, she met most of the remaining Spartan 2s at the FleetCom military complex in the briefing for Red Flag. It was sometime after this that Halsey was listed as KIA, probably after the glassing of Swordbase. Later, Noble returned after retrieving orders to destroy Swordbase and all sensitive data. Halsey once again called Noble Team to her, revealing Noble's true orders to them to transport a data storage unit containing a fragment of the AI Cortana, now uploaded with the information from the Forerunner facility, to the Halcyon-class light cruiser UNSC Pillar of Autumn, which was holding position in the Azad shipbreaking yards. Halsey left for Castle Base under the escort of June A266, while the remaining Noble Team members delivered the package to the Autumn. Dr. Halsey then continued working in Oni's castle base. She volunteered to remain behind to ensure that all UNSC technology was secured from possible capture. She initiated Operation White Glove, eventually destroying several AIs, including Cortana's older sister, Kalmia, to keep the Covenant from accessing UNSC databases. With the expectation that the Covenant would glass the planet, and the knowledge that even if they didn't, she would be facing an entire army of Covenant ground forces, Halsey was prepared to sacrifice her work. However, this changed when Spartans Fred 104, Kelly 087, Vin 030, Isaac 039, and Will 043 appeared at the entrance to Castle Base. With the firepower to potentially fight their way out, surviving Castle Base's destruction became viable. She gave emergency aid to the Spartans for their injuries, but a data anomaly detected by her accompanying AI Kalmia attracted Dr. Halsey's attention. The data had been accessed by Erekil, an AI that worked for Colonel Ackerson, one of Dr. Halsey's main competitors within Oni. After tracing the data access, Dr. Halsey stumbled across the AI left behind by its master. Erekil then threatened her, going as far as to tell her he would fill the room with poison, and that she would be reported. In response, Halsey typed in archaic line commands, the base code undergirding all AI functions which she had been instrumental in writing, to access his code directory and personal failsafe, erasing Erekil from existence. After he was destroyed, she pilfered through Ackerson's files, discovering a number of things including the location of Onyx, evidence of the Spartan 3 program, and a map of the mining tunnels Castle Base had been built upon. The latter particularly interested the Doctor as the file had been classified at X-ray level, making the file abnormally important for an ancient geographical survey. Halsey thus deduced that there was something of importance under the mountain and that it could be accessed through the mining tunnels under Castle Base. Assuming that at the very least these maps provided a backdoor, she ordered her Spartans out of the base and into the mine shafts. She then triggered Castle Base's self-destruct mechanism and activated the failsafe on Kalmia. Together with her Spartans, Halsey evacuated Castle Base, moving deeper into the shafts below. Over the course of the next 5 days, the Spartans and Dr. Halsey searched the mines, looking for either an exit or what Dr. Halsey would dub the most important discovery of the millennium. On the 5th day, Fred discovered an entrance into a large Forerunner structure, and within the Forerunner crystal. However, in acquiring the crystal, they had inadvertently released a spike of neutrino radiation, drawing large numbers of Covenant forces directly to their location. Following a Covenant attack, Halsey and her team retreated into a hallway and were forced to seal off the entrance. Soon after, contact with Isaac and Vin, who had volunteered to buy time for the others, was lost, and they were presumed dead. They quickly discovered that the hallway was a dead end, and Halsey and the surviving Spartans remained stranded at this location for some time. Days later, a group of Spartans, including John, rescued Dr. Halsey and the remaining Spartans and evacuated them from reach to the captured Covenant ship Ascendant Justice. Dr. Halsey later saw the importance of destroying the Forerunner crystal after it caused a slipspace anomaly that nearly resulted in the destruction of the Ascendant Justice. After escaping Reach, the group fled into the asteroid belt that the Spartans' first mission had been in. While there, she stole the rebel governor's spacecraft and, along with Kelly, whom she had sedated, escaped into slipspace. When asked by Admiral Whitcomb as to the reasons for her actions, she gave a simple UNSC code 392, which meant she was on a high-priority mission. She entrusted the Forerunner crystal to Corporal Locklear, telling him to keep it safe, hidden, and to do whatever it took to keep it from falling into enemy hands, as the Covenant would be able to go 100 times faster in slipspace should they obtain the crystal. Locklear destroyed the crystal using an explosive, killing himself in the process. Despite his efforts, however, the Covenant managed to procure several slivers from the crystal. In the aftermath of the battle, she was presumed dead by the Office of Naval Intelligence and honored along with other Oni personnel on a plaque at Oni Alpha Site. It can be assumed that the Spartans and Johnson neglected to report her retrieval from Castle Base, then her following kidnap of Kelly and the apparent desertion from the UNSC. Another possibility is that her name was added to the wall after the Battle of Reach, but before the Spartans returned to Earth. It could be that Oni did not want anyone to know that she had kidnapped Kelly, so they covered up the incident by saying she had died. Dr. Halsey and Kelly eventually arrived at Onyx, while reuniting with SCPO Mendez and eventually the remaining Spartan 2s and Spartan 3s. She helped decipher the mystery of the planet. At first, she tried to maintain secrecy about her intentions out of habit until Kurt 051 confronted her about it. She admitted that she was not actually looking for weapons, but rather the secret Forerunner shield world, which she believed to be the equivalent of a bomb shelter, and would be capable of keeping the remaining Spartans safe to evade the current war and let them live to fight another day. Her relative expertise with Forerunner technology was vital to the survival of the UNSC forces on the planet. At the end of the battle, she, along with Mendez, Blue Team, and the Spartan 3 survivors, found herself inside the shield world, which she believed was actually a micro-Dyson sphere. In Halo Glasslands, the story is continued, finding that for several days, possibly weeks, she is stuck inside the shield world with Blue Team, Chief Mendez, and the last of the Spartan 3s, until she is rescued by Oni. During the time she is trapped inside the Dyson sphere, she translates many Forerunner symbols, in the hope of finding Lucy B091, who went missing shortly after they began to explore Forerunner structure inside the micro-Dyson sphere. Several days later, Lucy returned with a Huragok named Prone to Drift, who showed her how to get back to her team. Dr. Halsey then starts asking Prone several questions as to where they are and how to get a message out to other humans outside the micro-Dyson sphere. Prone states that he cannot let her do that because there is an unknown entity, presumably a human ship, outside the sphere, and he refuses to give Halsey access to the communications until he knows it's safe. After an unsuccessful attempt to persuade Prone to give her access to the comms, Dr. Halsey decides to ignore him and tries to access the communication system herself, but before she can touch the controls, Prone slaps her hand away, stating again that he cannot allow her access. The slap enrages Dr. Halsey, and she starts to yell and threaten Prone, who is forced into a corner trying to protect himself. Lucy B091 pulls Halsey back and punches her in Prone's defense. After much talk between the humans, Lucy speaks to Prone and convinces him that it is safe outside the Dyson sphere, and Prone lets Dr. Halsey send a message outside. The message is received by Oni operatives, who then relay the message to Margaret Parangoski, the head of Oni, who sends a message back to Halsey requesting the Huragok to bring the Dyson Sphere into normal space. In her transmissions to Oni while the Huragok prepared to bring the shield world into normal space, Dr. Halsey tells of the Forerunner artifacts that could be used by humankind, such as the precision slipspace technology. After the shield world is brought into normal space, Kilo 5 was sent to arrest Halsey for the crimes she had committed, hijacking ships and kidnapping Kelly. After her arrest, she was sent to the UNSC Infinity to work on upgrading the warship. Afterwards, she was assigned to Ivanov Research Station until at least 2554. Halsey was later interrogated by an unknown individual regarding the Spartan 2 program. She defended the justifications for creating her Spartans, reminding her interrogator that they had saved humanity. The interrogator then meticulously noted that the Spartan 2s developed sociopathic tendencies. Halsey realized that her interrogator was looking for a reason to replace John and insisted that the best of her Spartans was still alive and should not be underestimated. 6 months after the New Phoenix incident, the UNSC Aladdin transported Dr. Halsey to the Infinity to examine a Forerunner artifact recovered by Fireteam Crimson during a mission on Requiem. The artifact had previously absorbed Dr. Henry Glassman into itself when he tried to study it. Halsey determined that the artifact is communing with the Infinity's engines, which are based on Forerunner technology and something on the planet. Sometime later, Halsey began examining the artifact under the supervision of Spartan 4 Gabriel Thorne. She then received a communication from an unknown person who informed her of the Promethean Knights. This led to Fireteam Majestic retrieving a package on Requiem. Upon examining it, the package let out a burst of energy and displayed images of New Phoenix. Noticing Captain Thomas Lasky and Commander Sarah Palmer sharing worried looks, Halsey confronted the former, accusing of having known the Prometheans' true nature. Lasky admitted that the UNSC had been aware that the Prometheans are ancient humans made into AIs. Halsey corrects that this Promethean is made from a person who lived in New Phoenix. Lasky expressed confusion as these memories couldn't have gotten from Earth to Requiem. Thorne then abruptly left the room, and Halsey realized that he'd been staring at an image from the artifact. Returning to the artifact, Halsey received another communication from the unknown individual, who, unknown to her, was Jul Ndama, the leader of the New Covenant. Ndama then asked what she knew of the librarian. Halsey accidentally repeated it out loud, causing Lasky and Palmer to become suspicious and discovered her secret communication. Lasky then ordered Palmer to arrest Halsey for withholding information. Halsey was then moved to Lasky's ready room, her wrists cuffed. She defended herself, stating that she did not give any information to her contact. Just as she criticized Palmer, Roland, the ship's AI, informed the captain that Thorne had been detected alive on Requiem. After being placed in the brig, Roland asked her why she withheld the truth. She responded by using an AI override protocol on Roland to escape and gather what information the UNSC had on the librarian, all of which was her own work, save for a debriefing of John 117, whom she apparently believed dead after the New Phoenix incident. Then she got into communication with Ndama, offering her assistance to find the librarian. However, Roland then managed to overcome the override and cut the communication and summon security. Captain Lasky then confronted Dr. Halsey and planned to place her in cryo, but she slaps him in the face, accusing the captain of withholding the truth about John's survival. Then suddenly, Promethean Knights began to teleport through the artifact onto the Infinity. During the battle, Lasky and Halsey are found by Palmer and escorted back to the Infinity's bridge. However, a lone Promethean Knight appears and takes Halsey hostage before teleporting back to Requiem. Sometime after arrival, she meets up with Jul Ndama at his base in the librarian's chamber. After managing to deactivate the shield, which according to her required a more human touch, she runs into the beam which has been formed in the librarian's artifact and disappears. During this time, however, Osman, as the new head of Oni, has ordered Lasky to have Halsey eliminated should she ever be found again. Commander Sarah Palmer then assigns herself the task of eliminating Halsey, much to Lasky's protest. When Halsey entered the shrine, she came face to face with the librarian. The librarian spoke about how Requiem's time was coming to an end, and how Halsey must accept her gift so humanity remains on the path to reclaiming the mantle. The gift Halsey received was called the Janus Key, an artifact which was indeed a map which showed every piece of Forerunner technology in the galaxy, including all the Halo installations, as well as hidden Forerunner technology that could propel humanity into a new stage of technological supremacy. However, when Halsey accepted the gift, she was launched back into Jul Ndama's clutches, where he relieved Halsey of one piece of the key, not realizing she had the second. Soon, Thorne had gained entry into the shrine and assassinated one of Ndama's bodyguards while using Gek's cloaking device. Halsey quickly threw the second piece of the key to Thorne just as Sarah Palmer arrives. Startled, Undama summons the Promethean Knights to protect him, and Palmer attempts to assassinate Halsey, but merely hits her shoulder, with Undama escaping with the help of a Promethean Knight with Halsey as his hostage. An enraged Commander Palmer demands to know what Majestic was doing there, and when told their mission, she questions why they should save a traitor. To which Thorne attempts to change her opinion by stating why Halsey had thrown him the key if she was presumably working with Undama. After Requiem is destroyed, Halsey is seen aboard Undama's ship with her left arm amputated. Believing that both Palmer and Fireteam Majestic were sent to assassinate her, she offers to assist Jewel Undama in exchange for revenge against the UNSC. In July 2558, Halsey was able to convince Jewel to attack the colony world of Oban in order to draw out the Infinity. Jewel agreed, and a combined Covenant Promethean force assaulted the planet. As planned, the ship was dispatched to Oban. With the Infinity in range, Halsey activated a Forerunner device to scramble the ship's Sha Fujikawa drive, preventing it from leaving to a nearby star system. Jewel's forces would wait on a nearby planet, hoping to retrieve the other half of the Janus Key from the UNSC. At Halsey's suggestion, Undama had a fake Forerunner artifact placed in a Forerunner structure on the nearby Atkiss 4. As per Halsey's plan, Dr. Glassman and the Spartan Fours of Infinity discovered the artifact and believed that it was related to the Janus Key. Halsey and Jewel watched Glassman's investigation from Song of Retribution, and Halsey revealed that she knew Jewel's public persona was a mere facade, when Undama expressed mock abhorrence at creating a copy of a Holy Forerunner object. Meanwhile, Glassman requests for Infinity to deliver their half of the Janus Key to him on the planet's surface for further analysis. Anticipating this, Halsey ensures that Undama had troops ready to ambush the UNSC convoy carrying their half of the key. Much to both Halsey's and Undama's surprise, the Pelican carrying the half was shot down before he could give the order. In the confusion, the rest of the Covenant ambush group began the attack. Halsey insisted on personally searching the crash site, but Undama decided to scourge the crash site himself, and he ordered Halsey to remain aboard his carrier. Unbeknownst to him, rebel Sally Neon was responsible for shooting down the Pelican, and he claimed half of the Janus Key for himself. Sometime after Undama had left for the planet, Halsey contacted him from the Song of Retribution and urged him to focus on the acquisition of the Janus Key rather than the rebellion among his ranks. In response to the developing situation, Jewel fulfilled Halsey's earlier request and allowed her to take a Phantom to the surface of Atkiss 4. Halsey and a convoy of Phantoms traveled to an island on Atkiss 4 to meet a defector from Nion's forces. After the defector reluctantly gave the half of the Janus Key he had stolen from Nion's base to Halsey, the Doctor and her Singhili escorts prepared to return to Song of Retribution. After Jewel had most of Halsey's convoy depart to battle UNSC forces elsewhere on the island, Halsey and the remaining Covenant forces were ambushed by Spartans Palmer, Thorne, and Ray. Palmer pursued Halsey and her guard into the jungle, while the other Spartans eliminated the surviving Covenant forces. After killing her guard, Palmer captured Halsey and led her through the jungle. The two began to argue, with Palmer accusing her of being a traitor and a war criminal, and Halsey calling Palmer out for acting as Admiral Osmond's puppet and stating that Oni turned her into a convenient scapegoat. As Palmer's judgment became momentarily clouded, Halsey ran off into the jungle. Palmer attempted to pursue, but she was injured and knocked into a crevice by a nearby harvester. Halsey contacted Undama, and he had a Phantom return her to his flagship. Shortly after, Jewel's forces fled the system with both halves of the Janus Key. Halsey and Jewel used the combined Janus Key to project a holographic map, which revealed the approximate location of the Absolute Record. Hiding within the Urs system, Halsey worked on finding the coordinates of the Absolute Record. On September 15th, 2558, pinpointed its exact location. 2 days later, as the fleet prepared to depart for the Absolute Record, a Phantom carrying Spartans Palmer, Thorne, Holly Tanaka, Dr. Glassman, and Ayit Sevi, a mercenary within Undama's ranks working for Oni, boarded Breath of Annihilation, intent on retrieving the location of the Absolute Record for the UNSC. The fleet arrived at an apparently artificial gas giant with a slipspace portal leading to the Absolute Record. Before the fleet could press forward, slipspace ruptures materialized around the fleet, destroying at least 2 ships and damaging Breath of Annihilation. Furious at the damage done to his fleet, Undama blamed Halsey for the loss and threw her across the Song of Retribution's bridge. While Halsey and Undama argued about the situation, she reminded him that once they reached the Absolute Record, they would discover technology beyond their comprehension that would more than compensate for the ships that were destroyed. Halsey further exaggerated that once he was in control of the Absolute Record's treasures, Undama would be seen as a god. Thus, Undama decided to travel to the Absolute Record, with only Retribution entering the portal while the rest made repairs. As Halsey and Undama prepared to enter the portal, they learned of rumors of the Spartans attacking personnel on Breath of Annihilation. Halsey dismissed Undama's fears and stated that the Spartans could not stop them from reaching the Absolute Record, though she was unaware that Palmer, Tanaka, and Glassman had boarded the Retribution. The carrier traveled through the portal and arrived into the record, where Halsey, along with the other humans who had infiltrated the carrier, were detected by a contender-class custodian. After Retribution was forcefully brought through a portal to a large chamber, Halsey, Umdama, and a contingent of zealots traveled to a lower platform, where Halsey addressed the Ancilla and told that she was selected by the librarian, and her possession of the Janus key was proof. However, the AI was skeptical of her claims, claiming Halsey could have obtained the key by force, and especially pondering why the other humans felt the need to conceal themselves. The AI had its sentinels bring the other humans down to the platform and stated its intent to let each human have a chance to account for its presence at the installation, despite Halsey's assertions that there was nothing to discuss as she had the Janus key. As she continued to argue with the AI and Glassman, an impatient zealot attacked a sentinel, leading to a conflict on the platform. Frustrated, the AI removed the flooring from under the feet of the Sangheili, with Tanaka, Palmer, and Glassman remaining on one platform and Halsey standing on another, Umdama managing to barely grab an edge just in time. In order to decide who would be the legitimate steward of the Absolute Record, the AI decided on a direct examination. It had both factions isolated and gave them a hypothetical scenario in which a sapient species, represented by Yonhet, turned out to have bodies conductive to a flood vaccine. Abducting and harvesting live beings would give a 35% chance of flood-immune material, but receiving dead bodies from the beings would give them a 33% chance. Despite Jules' advice, Halsey chose live capture while Glassman chose the peaceful option, and the Ancilla commended both. It then asked if their opponents in this test should be kept confined or immediately killed, but instead of answering, Halsey hacked the Ancilla and shut it down, taking control of the record for herself. In the record, Halsey followed a hologram of the librarian, directing her to dormant design seeds scattered across the galaxy, which she could choose to activate the next step of their plans for human evolution. While she listened, Umdama outside expressed his growing impatience with Halsey and told his warriors in secret to restrain her once she left to remind her who was in charge. Unfortunately for him, Halsey overheard Jewel through the record's systems and decided now was the time to sever their partnership, giving the order for the installation sentinels to attack Jewel and his men. While Halsey made preparations, Palmer, Tanaka, and Glassman came into contact with a sentinel containing the backup memory of the record's Ancilla. With their aid, the AI regained control of the facility and barred Halsey from controlling it further. Over Halsey's protest, the custodian admitted that Halsey had nearly passed its test and would have been given the record if she had not been so impatient to steal it. The custodian thus took the Janus key and began pulling the record back into slipspace. Shortly afterward, Halsey was recovered by Jules' forces and brought back aboard the Song of Retribution, unaware that she had tried to betray them and under the impression that the Ancilla had sent the Sentinels. Near the end of September, Dr. Halsey managed to contact Oni and the UNSC Infinity and provide Captain Lasky with coordinates at which she could be found. They pointed to the planet Kamchatka in the Casper system, where a Forerunner communication hub had recently flared to life and attracted the attention of both Jewel and the UNSC. Upon reaching Kamchatka, Halsey set about studying the nature of various incoming signals which were bouncing off of the Forerunner objects on the planet, akin to echolocation. Halsey concluded that Cortana was searching for something but could not guess at what that something might be. At Halsey's direction, a structure that was the focal point for one of the signals was eventually penetrated by the Covenant forces with her. In her research notes, Halsey bemoaned the way in which her work was being hampered by their overriding concern for ceremony, leaving her still without much information she did not have before they breached the structure. Sometime later, however, Halsey obtained scans of the new glyphs, including one that she was sure had never been observed before. After running it through the system, she found it bore a resemblance to an ancient Sangheili symbol for a demon that sleeps in the ground and must not wake. How this symbol might relate to that symbol, she was still unsure. Halsey further noted that the readings she would expect from a Forerunner structure, the scale of which they inhabited, were erratic at best, leading her to then wonder if perhaps Cortana was trying to access technology on Kamchatka and other locations directly but failing. By October 17th, the UNSC had been keeping tabs on the consolidation of the bulk of Jules' fleet at Kamchatka for weeks. Less than a week after the date, and at 3 weeks since Halsey contacted the Infinity, a native defense system on Kamchatka was disabled, but Halsey was unable to bring its corresponding alert system down soon enough. As a result, mechanical Promethean constructs arrived at Kamchatka within the hour and attacked the Covenant. That same day, the Spartan 4s of Fireteam Osiris were deployed to retrieve Halsey from Jewel Umdama's custody. They found Halsey and Umdama on a cliffside balcony of a temple structure. There, Halsey claimed to be trying to access the domain despite several problems, such as those relating to causal reconciliation. Jewel made his impatience with her efforts clear and also demanded that she afford him respect, but this only elicited taunting on her part over his loss of the Prometheans. Finally, she declared that their current location was unsuitable for triangulation should Cortana make another transmission. This enraged Jewel, who scolded her for failing to deliver results after weeks of chasing shadows, as he put it. It was at that moment that Osiris attacked Jewel and his guards, killing them all. Spartan Jameson Locke approached the doctor after pulling his knife from Jewel's neck to let her know that Captain Lasky wanted to see her. To this, she sarcastically replied that it had taken them long enough. Halsey accompanied Osiris back to the Infinity via Pelican. Upon landing within Docking Bay 11, the five of them were met by Lasky and Sarah Palmer. Catherine chided the captain for not coming to get her sooner and had him assure her that they would talk about that once they were somewhere with more privacy. Palmer took Halsey by the arm and began to lead her away, but even as they went, she couldn't help but ask Lasky for any information she had about Cortana's actions, which he flatly ignored. By October 23rd, the Infinity had arrived at the Crow's Eye Nebula. At 0630 hours that day, Linda 058, Kelly 087, Frederick 104, and John 117 were declared absent without leave, having made an unsanctioned departure from the nebula in a stolen Winter-class prowler. Spartan Palmer escorted Halsey to the Infinity's bridge later that day, where she immediately began pressing the matter of Cortana once more to the captain, stressing how dangerous she had become through accessing the domain and taking control of devices which had begun to cause damage on a number of colonies. Lasky informed her that the Master Chief had reported being contacted by Cortana, which Halsey saw as a potentially disastrous. She was then told that he'd gone in search of her and was shocked at the notion that Lasky would have let him go, but he explained that John was not acting independently. Halsey began to speak on why John was unequipped to deal with Cortana as a threat, but was interrupted by Roland, who until that point had been unaware of her continued survival. He questioned why the Doctor was so quick, in his mind, to label Cortana as a threat or danger, seeing as she was the one who had created her to begin with. 2 days later, Fireteam Osiris was deployed once again, but this time with the goal of apprehending Blue Team and the stolen Prowler. The AWOL Spartans had been followed to Meridian, a moon of Hestia 5. Osiris failed to stop them, and they managed to board a Guardian Custode, which had been long buried beneath the moon's surface and had now slipped away. As such, the fours were sent to return to the Infinity empty-handed. The day after this, Locke and Lasky met Palmer and Halsey on the bridge, and Locke let it be known that a construct they'd met on Meridian, calling itself the Warden Eternal, had confirmed the Doctor's theory that Cortana was behind the Guardian's ongoing reactivations. Halsey then turned her attention to Syneon, a religious site on St. Helios where she had discovered another Guardian still lay buried. Palmer and Roland took over from there, explaining that if they could feed coordinate data from Meridian Guardian to one on St. Helios, it could lead them right to wherever Blue Team had vanished to. After arriving to the Ursvide Jory system on October 27th, Halsey accompanied Palmer to a waiting D-79 TC Pelican in the process of being loaded up for travel to St. Helios. At the approach of Spartans Locke and Olympia Vale, Palmer let it be known that the Doctor was trying to find a way to communicate with the Guardian Custode on the planet. Halsey assured Locke she'd have a briefing for him once they were all planetside. Fireteam Osiris soon met up with the Arbiter, and following this, Halsey and Palmer joined them at a camp of the Swords of St. Helios had set up in Nusra. Whilst Locke was treating with Vidam, Cortana's voice suddenly rang out from within their meeting tent, prompting Halsey and Palmer to both rush inside. Halsey noted that she touched every network device in the camp just then and concluded she must know of the Guardian they were after. Vidam agreed to assist in the effort to get to it at Syneon, but only on the condition that victory would be assured when they finally moved in on the city. Pledging they'd deploy within the hour, Locke told Halsey to have her plan ready by then. While in the Arbiter's camp, Dr. Halsey's amputee status was taken by the Ungoi and self-proclaimed biologist Gribium to support theories that human females signal maturity by losing appendages. He further hypothesized that she would soon begin to release spores and spin a cocoon of rich meat silk. In return for her cooperation with his request, she also made one of her own for more intelligent assistance to aid her and urged him to loosen the security placed on her. Sometime after this, she contacted Locke over an open communications channel to let him know she'd prepared the briefing but preferred to discuss it in person to avoid being eavesdropped on. From atop a Forerunner-built structure overlooking the camp, she waved the Spartans over to her as they neared and then proceeded to introduce them to what a constructor sentinel was. She explained that if one could be acquired from the support stations which riddled the hills around them, then she could use it to interface with the Guardian. She further informed them that Palmer had the location of one such station. In a supplemental status update for Thel, she pointed out that while making stubborn claims to not need her or the Guardian, he ought to remember the organization she represented and its history. She hoped that this would get him to show her some respect and signed off by claiming this was to be her last mandatory update. Osiris secured a constructor before the sun had set and returned to the camp with it. Halsey observed that it seemed to be working as she had planned for it to, but told Locke's team that it could take some time until she was finished calibrating it. She then let them know that Palmer wished to see them. When she was ready, she called Osiris back to her spot over on the Forerunner structure, which she informed them she was using to upload the coordinates recorded on Meridian to the Sentinel. She wanted them to be ready to go as soon as she signaled it was time, but admitted it might be hours until then. However, the constructor suddenly took off just then, flying towards Suneon. As Osiris and the Swords of Sanghelios prepared to follow it, Halsey made sure Locke knew Cortana had been built from a matrix of her own mind, cautioning him that, like her, she would take drastic measures if she thought they served the greater good. The domain, she added, would give her incredible power with which to enact those measures. As Locke walked away, she called out to him again and pleaded with him to stop Cortana, but to bring John home to her. Palmer had planned to get the Doctor off-world once the attack on the Ocean City began, but she and Halsey eventually arrived at the battle near its end. The Guardian had risen above the waves by that point and was preparing to depart, so Palmer meant to pick up Osiris and deliver them to it before it did so. Halsey could not bear to even keep her eyes open for very long as the conflict rained plasma fire all around them. Palmer managed to get the other Spartans to the Guardian, but in the process their Pelican's left thruster was struck by a Type 54 Banshee's fuel rod and set ablaze. Though it seemed as if Palmer would be able to get them out of there regardless, the Guardian then sent out an attenuation pulse, which neutralized the dropship's power and sent it spiraling toward the Sardon Sea below. Halsey and Palmer both managed to survive the downing of their Pelican, and by the next day they had made it to the Arbiter's encampment in Nusra. Using the Forerunner technology she had been fiddling with upon first arriving on the planet, she was able to receive a coded message from Roland on the UNSC Infinity, who informed the Doctor that Earth had been taken offline by the rogue AIs and that they had just managed to escape. He said the ship was now slipspace hopping on random trajectory but would be showing up off the far side of Suban the next day and remaining there for 15 minutes. The coordinates the AI provided could be reached in a matter of hours with space-capable transportation. Fortunately, after darkness had fallen over the region, the approach of a Pelican drew she, Palmer, Vadam, and 2 other Swords of Sanghelios to emerge from a tent to meet it. When it landed and opened its rear hatch, Spartan Locke and John were the first 2 individuals to emerge and present themselves before both of their respective teams. Having not seen John for over 6 years, she told him it had taken him long enough. When the Arbiter insisted that both Blue Team and Fire Team Osiris join those gathered for a meal before departing, Halsey clarified to him that they wouldn't be leaving that night. Although the possession of a working D-79 TC Pelican would now afford the humans passage off Sanghelios, the Infinity would not be arriving until 1800 hours the following day. Edward Buck questioned the trustworthiness of Roland once Catherine explained the situation, but she rebutted that if he'd been compromised, they'd already be dead. Midway through the meal of Kolo and Kuskadu served by their Sangheli hosts, Halsey disappeared to chat with John, Fred, Kelly, and Linda. A little less than an hour before sunrise the next day, the Spartans and Halsey all piled into the Pelican. As the Arbiter bid farewell to John and voiced his confidence in their ability to combat the new threat the created posed, the Sangheli shot Halsey a meaningful glance which she ignored with a haughty sniff. While en route to the rendezvous, Halsey pointed out that Sangheli resistance was likely drawing the attention of the Guardian, attempting to pacify the world just then, again arguing that they'd already be dead if they'd been detected. With about 20 minutes until the Infinity was due to arrive, Buck broke out a pack of playing cards and asked if anyone was up for hearts, but Halsey ignored him, as she was working on a tablet she'd scrounged up. Buck managed to get her attention by referring to the Queen of Spades as a Halsey for a couple hands into the game, but still gave no response other than to announce that their window was approaching. The gargantuan supercarrier arrived almost exactly on schedule, and Halsey had secured all her things by then. As Kelly docked the Pelican in the ship's portside Bay 5, Buck drew Halsey's attention yet again when he laughed out loud upon realizing his longtime lover, Veronica Dare, was aboard. The Doctor and the Spartans were met in the bay by a lieutenant who had come to escort she, Palmer, John, and Locke to the bridge to see Captain Lasky. Following that meeting, Lasky had Dr. Halsey confined to a workspace, and the Infinity began a series of randomized slipspace jumps in order to avoid detection by Cortana's Guardians, emerging from slipspace at its first vector point that very day. That same day, Roland answered a distress call from the UNSC Sentry of El Morro with the affirmation that the supercarrier was on its way to assist it. By the start of November, the ship exited slipspace at one point to receive the recently reassembled Spartan Team Alpha 9. By January 24th, 2559, they were still on the run, performing erratic jumps to evade discovery. That day, just after 12:04 hours, Halsey was approached by a Spartan from Fireteam Apollo with the serial number 92738-61842-LC. This individual had been tasked by Captain Lasky with investigating what was being dubbed the Guardian incident. Halsey pointedly asked how they had gotten clearance to talk with her and was made aware of the Priority 1 directive given to them by the captain. After then confirming she was being recorded, the Spartan informed her that they were there to talk about Cortana. Halsey was interested to hear what their investigation had unearthed so far, but they reported not being authorized to share anything further than their having concluded that the cognitive duress and strain Cortana has sustained since the discovery of Installation 04 was partially responsible. The Spartan's first question for the doctor concerned Cortana's creation, and Halsey was soon defending her actions incumbent in that process. She also refused to reveal what had become of the clones of herself she had made, claiming it was still classified even for them. Asked what she thought the best explanation for what had happened was, Halsey recalled Cortana's first words and theorized she was simply doing what she had to do in order to keep the game from ending. Halsey then quoted the Greek philosopher Epictetus and suggested Cortana was the answer to his thought experiment regarding the harm in saying, "Tomorrow you will die," while kissing one's child. When her interviewer asked what she thought the solution to stopping her was, Catherine ignored the question since she doubted coming up with that would be a part of a Spartan's directive and was convinced she'd been locked away for that purpose. 92738-61842-LC countered that she'd been locked up because of her repeated protocol violations, which only led to further argument and the Spartan finally choosing to take their leave. Before they went, Halsey shared the last thing Cortana had said to her. The Spartan asked what her words were supposed to have meant, but Halsey could only say that she had been hoping they were able to explain them to her. On September 19th, 2559, Dr. Halsey made modifications to John's third-generation Mjolnir, itself having first been created on February 10th, 2559. And that is all the information we have on Dr. Catherine Halsey, and I expect we will learn more with the release of Halo Infinite or possibly the next Halo novel. Thank you as always so much for watching, everybody. It's such a blast making this. Go ahead and subscribe for more content like this, and also please go subscribe to Original Human Geek where we can find all of our group content. Down below in the description you can also find my Twitch page where I stream Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as Saturday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Pokemon Nuzlocke. And also my social media links will be down in the description as well. Again, thank you everybody so much for watching, and until the next time, this is Mark, the Man of Gamma, signing off. Bye, guys.